The beginning of the evolution of newspapers, news organizations across America represented communities based on varying racial differences and topics of interest. Savannah Tribune, formerly known as the Colored Tribune, presented stories and reports tailored to the African American community of Savannah, Georgia. This weekly newspaper began publishing issues in 1875 and currently remains active. In the early decades of the newspaper's life, the physical appearance and content underwent significant change and dynamic. The first print, presented from December 4th, 1875, was still under its original name, the Colored Tribune, as it was controlled by all-white printers and was heavily text-oriented. The entirety of the content on the first page is a summarization of the weekly sermon given by the Reverend. There are no advertisements or photographs. With its simple three-column format, it's easy on the eye of the reader. Under the title of the paper is what seems to be a sort of mantra that may have been pertinent to the organization, stating, "With charity for all, with malice toward none." Nearly 3 decades later, there is a larger edition of popular news stories relevant to the political matters for both local and national levels. The 1904 issue presents a more complex layout, moving from the three-column format to a slimmer six-column format. In congruency with the 1875 issue, there are no advertisements presented. Variation in point size for some articles pulls more dimension to the visual appearance in comparison to the monotonous text in the first issue. This draws the eye of the reader to important issues of the time. This concept of enlarging headings and titles adapted further over the years with later versions of the paper. As development of photography evolved, more newspapers were able to take advantage of this by luring readers with visuals on the front page. This is evident in the 1918 version of the newspaper. The image of Emmett J. Scott is prominently placed at the center and appears to be the featured story for this issue. Other stories of political issues and soldiers wounded in war were still presented with the end of the First World War around the corner. There are still no advertisements present on this issue. Local stories about the Black schools are highlighted with features on the ending of the flu epidemic, and funds were raised for different schools in surrounding states. Less pertinent stories of local marriage announcements and wives of military personnel are placed at the bottom of the front page. In the 1922 version of the paper, the use of cartoon graphics comes into play, illustrating tension between Black voters and the Republican Party within the state of Delaware. A more complex organizational format of 7 columns is used for this issue. There continues to be a lack of advertisements displayed on the front page. These were likely placed on other sections of the paper to redirect to more important matters. Larger text size is more fluidly utilized to designate new sections for different stories. Overall, the format is much easier to follow for the reader, although there are still 12 different stories presented on the front page. Major news stories prominently displayed are those of both political and racial matters. An integration of varying religious parties is represented at this point, steering away from the one-sided perspective of the Black church. There continues to be an overwhelming amount of text in comparison to photos and other visuals of variation. The Savannah Tribune evolved exponentially from its first issues, tailored toward the religious Black community of Savannah, to a more diverse representation of other local and national stories of political and racial significance. The paper continues circulation to this day with nearly 10,000 readers.